And we take a close look at our top story this hour, the quakes that have devastated parts of Turkey and Syria. Nirvana Shawky, CARE International Regional Director for Middle East and North Africa, joins us live from Cairo. Ms. Shawky, earlier we spoke to our correspondent. He mentioned, he was quoting the WHO saying that although Turkey is under stress, relatively speaking, for Syria, they're looking at a crisis on top of multiple crises. How does that translate into in terms of rescue and relief for Syria? How does it compare to what you are doing in Turkey?
Absolutely. Thank you. And thank you so much for having me. I think that you have rightfully noted that it is a crisis over a crisis in northwest Syria. People have been in crisis mode and crisis situation for the last 12 years. There are 4.6 million residents of the area of northwest Syria alone, that 60% of them are internally displaced from different parts of Syria, and the majority of these displaced populations are living in camps and informal settlements. And so for them, and it's very sad to say that this earthquake just came in as an addition to their ongoing suffering and agony. One of the biggest challenges from a rescue efforts and also from a humanitarian response perspective is how to have access to these populations that are mostly trapped in the northwest zone. Gratefully, that the Turkish government has announced this morning that they will be opening the crossing of Bab el-Hawa between northwest and Turkish border to allow access to humanitarian assistance. But this is actually caveated with daily approvals.
Oh, Ms. Shawky,
having access.
Pardon me for cutting. You would have to make clear to us. So you mentioned 4.6 million. People living in northwest Syria. Of that, 60%, more than 60% are internally displaced people who are therefore living in very informal type lodgings. Now, if this earthquake happens, do we even know whether they have survived? How many have survived? Do we even have this kind of information to hand? That's millions of people we're talking about.
Absolutely, absolutely. And all the initial information that is coming through now from northwest Syria is totally devastating. We don't know the formal information, but we're still gathering and the information about the extent of the damage. But we know that after years of displacement, many of the people in northwest Syria have found themselves in tents, cuddled together in this severe and cold winter, trying to make ends meet. And then they were awakened by the earthquake impact on their tents and their lives and their nutritional status and mental health. And this is devastating for sure.
All right, these are immediate cares, no less important, of course. But if we look longer term, the WHO has warned that up to 23 million of that 1.4 million children will have long-term effects from this earthquake. And that, of course, includes Turkey as well. Is there anything an organization like yours can do now at this, I suppose you could call it an inflection point, to change the course of life for these many people affected by this earthquake? These earthquakes, rather.
Absolutely. 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 I mean, I think that the first step is going to be focused on the rescue efforts. We want to make sure that the affected population are getting access to basic needs like tents and isolation sheets and non-food items and energy supplies. But also we want to ensure that there is continuous access to education, continuous access to women and girls for protection needs, for gender protection needs, and also access to medical care. These are very urgent needs, and there are lots of pleas now to the international community to prioritize the support to northwest Syria, and also in addition to the support that they are pledging to Turkey in order to face this very complicated, protracted
to be fair, the global community has reacted with generosity, at least up to now. I was wondering, given all these pledges of assistance, even from Singapore as well, is anyone coordinating all this money, help people? If you look at Turkey alone, 24,400 people are going out as rescue workers. So many people over such damaged terrain. Is anyone organizing this so that we make best use of limited people and resources?
Absolutely. The UN has actually managed the coordination mechanism for access to Northwest Syria for the last decade. We have already the mechanism that allows the access to international agencies and non-governmental organizations like CARE International to have access to Northwest Syria through the coordination mechanism that is led by the UN the UN operations. And the UN Security Council has already approved the renewal for access to cross-border from Bab el-Hawa crossing between northwest Syria and Turkey back on the 10th of January. So the mechanism is there, and it is really working to the best benefit of the population in northwest Syria. And the UN have been managing actually a very complex operation, I would say, in northwest Syria for the last decade that in some moments exceeds $500 million operations.
Thanks so much for that, Ms. Nirvana Shawky, CARE International Regional Director for the Middle East and North Africa, speaking to us there from Cairo.
For more on the earthquakes, Trent Murray joins us now. He's in Malatya in Turkey. Trent, you've just arrived near the quake zone. Give us a sense of the difficulties that rescuers are facing in reaching those areas.
Yeah, well, I've not quite made it in to Malatya yet. It is one of the hardest hit cities in the region. I'm just a little bit further out in Elazığ, which is a town effectively on the periphery of the earthquake zone. They certainly are feeling the shakes here from those aftershocks, but they have been spared much of the damage that we've seen in other parts of the country. It is an increasingly bleak and desperate picture across southern Turkey as that search and rescue operation remains underway. We know, of course, 5,000 people at least have been confirmed killed both here and over the border in Syria. But this is still a search and rescue operation, and around 50,000 first responders are now combing through that rubble in various cities, including Malatya and others, trying to find survivors. The big concern, though, is that window of survivability is rapidly closing. You can probably see by the way I'm dressed and the snow behind me, it is bitterly cold here. And for people that may still be stuck under the rubble, trying to survive in these sub-zero temperatures will be very, very difficult. We're going on 36 hours now since that first quake hit, and the aftershocks are certainly continuing.
The situation is challenging there, as you've described, Trent, but what more can you tell us about the details of the search and rescue operation that's taking place? What does it entail?
Well, there is a major national call-up, if you will, here within Turkey. When I landed at Istanbul International last night, local time, there were hundreds of people that had responded to a text message from the disaster response agency calling for volunteers to basically board specially chartered flights to be shuttled down to this rescue zone and to just try and get in there and help comb through. We also know that international help is coming. Of course, the European Union really stepping up. We know around 2,600 first responders are already on the ground, many more coming, aid coming from as far away as Japan and South Korea and China, of course. Specialist sniffer dogs on the way. The difficulty is the area that we're talking about is some 110,000 square kilometres wide. It is a huge area that rescuers are effectively having to go city by city, street by street, looking for people. For many desperate Turkish families, including ones that were just on the flight I was on down from the capital, they feel that they can't just sit around and wait for the state. They are just wanting to get in there themselves, often with their bare hands, and try and dig through the rubble of a relative's apartment building to try and find signs of life. It is a desperate situation. And as I say, with night about to fall once again, those temperatures are going to drop, making it increasingly difficult. I should also mention the aftershocks. I did mention them earlier, but I really can't understate just how heavy some of them have been, how big some of them have been. That, of course, is hampering rescue efforts as well. When those aftershocks hit, often already dangerous buildings that are potentially on the verge of collapsing then do collapse, putting first responders in danger. We know a number of state of emergencies have already now just been declared by President Erdogan, and more international support, I think, will certainly be needed, not just here, but especially in Syria, where they don't just have the amount of infrastructure that Turkish authorities do to comb through their rubble and their aftermath.
Just a few precious daylight hours left there, Trent, for this search and rescue effort. Thank you very much for that update. Trent Murray there, just outside Malatya in Turkey.